So, what's going to happen today? Well, we're going to talk about how you can do no money down deals to create consistent positive cash flow, not negative cash flow, positive cash flow using the rent own strategy. So, you've probably have heard of rent own, you've probably heard of lease options, all that sort of stuff. Um, it's a great tool. I think every real estate investor needs to have this in their portfolio because you can do a lot of problem solving. So lots of people will pass over deals over houses that they can't make the numbers work for whatever reason, a number of reasons, and you apply the rent own strategy to it, and all of a sudden it's a really, really good deal. And especially if you can do them with little to no money down. So that's what we're going to be focused on. So three things that I'm going to talk about specifically within this is no money down deal. It's someone to buy a house for me, right? So I'm an investor, but I'm looking for money partners. And so that's essentially what we're going to talk about up front, how to structure it this way. I'm just going to share some of my stories of what I've done. And yeah, how I started out doing these no money down deals. And hint, it was a bit of an accident or wasn't intentional up front, but it's a fun story. You'll like it. Second one is doing no money down deals with distressed sellers. I call distressed sellers tired and frustrated landlords, and they're everywhere. There are so many opportunities, and you'll start to see that. Then I'll talk thirdly about how to flip a house using none of your own money. You don't even have to buy the house, and you can renovate it and turn around and sell it, and you can make a good profit on it. All right. So that's the three major categories that we're going to talk about today. And then at the end, I'm going to give you three specific things that you can do to take action on what you learned today. Okay. All right. So this goes even before my first no money down deal, but just want to talk about my very first rental property, right? For those of you who have done some rentals, you can all remember your first. And for those of you who are brand new, you want to do your first. And so, you know what? It's a mountain that you got to climb. Now, for some people, that mountain is a small mountain, and for others, it seems like it's a massive mountain. But once you get there, it's like, oh, cool. Well, this looks great from up here. And how do I get to the next level, right? How do I get more properties? All that sort of stuff. So this is my first rental property. And basically what I did was, this is dating back to 2006. So my first property is in 2006. I had been thinking about investing in real estate for about 6 years. Did some studying, lots of questions, but I didn't take action. So that was 6 years of lost time, which is really, really unfortunate because I missed a ton of opportunities. We lived in the States for part of those 6 years and back here in Canada. And you know what? Coulda, shoulda, woulda. I'm not going to spend time doing that. But for those of you who are on the fence, you know what? There's no time to take action like today. Just get into it and go for it. And yeah. Anyways, so what was the pivotal point for me was I finally read Rich Dad Poor Dad. And maybe it was my second time reading it, but the concepts in there, that basic book by Robert Kiyosaki, just really resonated with me. And what specifically resonated with me, well, there's two things, but one thing that helped me get into this house was he talked about his condominium, his first rental property that he bought in Honolulu, and how he was underwater each month, right? And what I mean by that is, if you have got a rental property and your expenses are $1,200 a month, but you only get $1,000 in revenue and income, you're $200 a month in the negative. Minus cash flow, you're underwater. And he used that example just as a learning, just being vulnerable. And it's like, that makes sense. I mean, you should be able to get into a deal knowing what that's all about. So I started doing research. I started looking at homes in a specific area in my city. And So I started to see the prices that they were, as well as I started to look at what the rents were. So I figured out what the kind of the most common rental board was there. You know, the classifieds, the online classifieds, whether it's Craigslist, Kijiji, or now Facebook Marketplace is really hot. I looked on there and specifically for homes in the area that this house was, and I figured, okay, I can probably get between $1,400 and $1,500 rent on this property a month. And I think once I run the numbers in terms of how much the mortgage will be, taxes and insurance, right? The PITI, principal, interest, tax, and insurance, that'll run me about $1,200 a month. So is $200 a month positive cash flow good on a deal like this? Well, at the time, I didn't really know. And I just knew that I was above. And so what ended up happening was I purchased this house and my expenses were about 1200. I ended up getting, I believe, 1450 for my first tenant, and then it went up from there. So I was cash flow positive on this first deal. So I just want to talk a little bit about the first rental property. Then from there, I took a whole bunch of education from a national organization, and I was able to scale up. I got, I think I got two or three more mortgages and a total of five or six doors, and it was awesome. But the thing is, I hit a wall. I hit a wall where the banks were saying we can't give you any more mortgages, right? Based on your debt servicing. I don't think I had any more down payments to come up with. And so I hit a wall and I was like, that was crushing for me because I wanted to just keep growing my portfolio. So with that, I started exploring different ways, right? I was still learning. I was still managing my five or six doors, and that was great. But I continued to want to really expand and grow from there. So that's when I started realizing about the idea of no money down properties. All right, so let me pause there, take a few steps back. I was working my day job and I was looking after my properties. I was making offers on homes. I was doing renos to some of them, filling them with tenants. Some tenants were great, some tenants were not so great. And anyways, I was just going about life, working my day job, which I loved. I won't get into that. It's a whole nother story. But so Monday mornings, coffee break. Hey, Cam, what have you been up to this weekend? And I would just tell them about what I was doing. And I talk about, yeah, I filled, a rental property this weekend. It's like, oh, cool. Like where in the city? Okay, cool. And what sort of rents are you getting? Wow, you're getting that kind of rent? And it's just like, yeah. And, the questions would just kind of continue on from there. And so this went on for a couple years. So kind of at about year four ish, I had someone from the office say, hey, can we grab coffee with you? And sure, let's do it. We were friends inside and out the office, but let's go for coffee. And they're like, we're really interested in what you're doing. Like, it sounds like you're doing really well with these properties, and we're really interested. We'd like to invest, but we have no idea where to start. Like, could we invest with you? We've got some money. And I was kind of like, well, sure. And I had no idea how to structure or anything like that. And I just said, well, yeah, let's make it happen. I'm not sure exactly how we do it, but let's work it out together. So we started doing that, and I started bringing deals by them. And I would only present to them deals that I would be interested in, right? Knowing that the numbers so far work. And I think, I passed three or four properties. I probably looked at 15, 20 deals, but brought three or four across, to them. And so this was one of them. And so let me pause on that point for a second, because you've heard about elevator pitches and stuff like that, right? And so what I realized I was doing in those times that people were asking me about, what I was doing, and I was just energetic and enthusiastic about it, I was giving my elevator pitch. I was just telling them good stuff. I was telling them about some of my numbers. I was dropping little morsels of, of information maybe look at it as like little pieces of chocolate I was putting out there. And people were picking up these pieces of chocolate and going, this tastes pretty good. I'd like to know more. Right? I wasn't saying to them, and I didn't even realize that I was giving my elevator pitch at the time, but I wasn't saying to them, yeah, here's some chocolate. Do you want to buy it from me? It's $10 for a piece. Right? And it's like, no, I'm good, thanks. And, they never kind of talked to me about it again. So, unbeknownst to myself, I was giving the best elevator pitch where I would talk with passion about what I was doing, but I wouldn't ask them to get involved with me because I didn't know I needed investors at that point. So back to this couple. So I kept bringing deals before them, and so we finally landed on this deal. So I'll walk you through this deal a little bit. Okay, my first rent own and no money down deal. So I'll get to my investors on this in a second. But what I did was, as I was finding the house, as I was structuring the deal with my potential business partners for them to purchase a house for me, I was also finding a qualified tenant buyer because I was wanting to do rent own, and because I knew now. Talking a little bit about my job, I was at a point now where I felt like I wanted to do a lot more real estate, but the banks were saying no. And I was thinking about it was probably time for me to move on from my day job. I'd worked with this organization for 17 years, and it was awesome 17 years. Don't regret any of it. But I just felt it was time for me to move on. And full-time real estate investing was what I wanted to do. So I jumped into a course on how to do rental. Okay. So here we are at this property. So in my head, I'm figuring out how to do rent own. I'm figuring out how to get an investor to purchase it for me. So those were kind of the two moving parts. I had, probably 12 months of runtime with my investors because we had bought another property. It was a buy, rent, and hold. And so I had experience now with them. So I knew kind of how to work with the investor. The rent own part was new for me. So I go about it and I advertise for a qualified tenant buyer. And I won't go into detail like with all of that, but they got enough income, they got some money to put down, all that sort of stuff. So I did find a qualified tenant buyer, and they had money up front, and they had monthly cash flow coming into the deal. And I'm jumping ahead of myself now because this is actually my investors sheet here. Because so for my investors who purchased this property, they put money down up front, they got monthly cash flow, and they had no maintenance fees, right? So the way I structure these deals is that we try to push the maintenance costs onto the tenant buyer, because the tenant buyer, the rent-own client, we're training them how to think like homeowners. So on this house, we didn't have very many things. I think we had a hot water tank go. There was a leaky pipe under the jacuzzi tub, and maybe a couple other minor things, but the tenant buyer looked after all those things. The tenant buyer was happy to do it because he knew that he was going to own this property, and he was happy to learn how to do this stuff, right? So yeah, so that's basically how I structured that in with my investors, and then there was a built-in sale after 3 years. So let's just go to the next slide here. So from my tenant buyers on this particular house, I got a check for $22,000 up front on the deal, and then I got monthly cash flow. Right, I think on this one, the numbers were I paid the owner $1,200 a month, and my tenant buyers paid me $1,400 a month. Right, so total rent coming in was $1,400, but I in two separate payments. And then I paid the owner $1,200. So I had a $200 a month positive cash flow, right? With no phone calls about the toilets being plugged. I mean, maybe I did, but I told them, who to call. They looked after it. I didn't run out there, try to save some bucks and fix it myself. And I didn't even call the repair guy. I just gave them our preferred client, And so this deal went about 4.5 years. And this is my check at the end of the deal. So I got the money up front, I got monthly cash flow, and then I got this at the end. Is that a good deal? I mean, yeah, obviously it's a good deal. What's amazing about this was my first one. Have you ever done something where you look back and go, holy smokes, how did I do this deal so well? Right. And because I had very little money into this deal, and I made an amazing return. My investors made an amazing return. My tenant buyers got into home ownership, paying fair market value for the house, and it was just a win-win-win for all parties around. So that was my first rent home. Was there hiccups along the way? Absolutely. Um, but you work through them and then you go on to your next one. And I think that one, from the time that I started getting trained on how to do it, it took me 6 weeks to structure the whole deal, with the owners as well as the tenant buyers. And then I got some money up front. And then 2 weeks later, so a total of 8 weeks, is when the deal became live. And so it was just an awesome deal. And it was kind of at that point where I had that deal and I realized, you know what? I only need to do like four more of these each year to quit my day job. And, if you've ever played Cash Flow by Robert Kiyosaki, he talks about, the rat race, getting out of the rat race. And, for me, I was in a a C-suite position in my organization, so I had a decent income. I had obviously a primary mortgage. I had three kids at home with my wife, and so our monthly costs weren't cheap. I mean, they weren't massive, but it wasn't super easy getting out of the rat race. Whereas if you're starting out and you know like if you have got low expenses, it's so much easier to get out of the rat race, right? And whether or not you're living at home because you're younger, or perhaps you're starting over again, which is okay. What a time to get into real estate, especially no money down deals, because you only need a couple of these going and you're cash flow positive, and you can structure these to grow and to build. And I mean, it's just fantastic. It takes a mind shift to be able to think about this, but it's incredible. And I'm living proof of that, right? C student, D student, all through high school, and I'm doing these deals. So after that last deal that I just showed you, it was about a month later. I'd start looking at other deals right away, but it was about a month later that I analyzed all the numbers on my first rent-own deal and recognized, you know what, this was an amazing deal, and I can duplicate this. Like, I think my investor friends will do one more deal with me in terms of, how much money they've got to put down and the ability to get another mortgage. But if they will do it, there's probably other people who want to do it as well. And so that first year, it just kind of grew from there. I did four more of these deals. I was doing some other real estate stuff as well, but I did four more of these deals, and it did replace my income for my day job. And then I just kept on going. So I think I did, within 12 months, I did five of them. And then the next year I did, I think about eight or nine, and then it just kind of kept going up there. I did just over 40 of them in 5 years, from 2010 to 2015, just in terms of that window of time. And they were all no money down deals. Now, when I say no money down deals, I mean that I didn't have to come up with thousands of dollars. I didn't have to come up with 50 or 60 or $100,000 as a down payment. I came up with $100 per property to make it a legally binding agreement. And so, on those 40 homes, I put out $4,000 over the course of 5 years. And then all my time, of course, right? All my time to structure the deals, run the deals. But I got investors. And that first couple, they probably brought me 15 deals through their network, right? They probably brought me about 7 other investors, and a bunch of them took took two, and I think one did three or whatever. And it just kept on growing like that. And I had other investors come in that just heard via the grapevine what I was doing, and they invested, and they, told their cousins, and three of his cousins invested, and their brothers and sister, and it just kept on growing like that. And so just with, focus, I just kept on going with that. So here is here's a tired and frustrated landlord deal that I'm showing you. And this is a deal where, I found a distressed seller, and I worked the deal. And so I got wind of this house. I went into it, and it was in rough shape. And the story from the owner was that, he was just tired of dealing with tenants. Not only tenants, but tired of putting tenants in there and then them not paying, right? And just didn't have the drive to, take the time to find really good tenants, all that sort of stuff. And so the house didn't show well. It was now vacant. It was run down, beat down. The foundation had some issues in the basement. And it was even on MLS during a fairly decent market that it should have sold. But again, it didn't show well. And I even went in there, and another real estate investor who was pretty well known across Canada had one of his crew in there, and they passed over the deal. But I saw opportunity here. So let me see what my slide says here. So with the owner, we entered into an agreement. And let's see here. Yeah, so we entered an agreement with my contracts. I gave them a check of $100, right, just to make it legal and binding. So I now controlled the deal, right? So the owner still owned it, which gives them peace of mind. But on paper, I controlled it. I was the owner. I had interest in the property, right, through my 3 or 4 contracts that I've got with them. So that's cool. So now that gives me rights to this property. So I paid them rent every month. I think we set up an 18-month term, and I bought it off of them after 18 months. So immediately, once the paperwork was signed, I gave them the check for $100. They deposited it, and then the next month came along, and I gave them their rent. Their headache was gone. They're like, okay, this dude seems to know what he's talking about, and we just got a rent check. He's not living in it. We understand that. We're allowing him to sublet it. Yeah, I'm happy. I mean, obviously, I really want to sell the property, but I can wait 18 months, especially if I'm going to get 18 months of mortgage pay down, and they're going to look after the property. I don't have to go check on it. I don't have to go mow the lawn. I don't have to make sure the heat's on in winter, all that stuff. So they were quite happy about it. So we turned around and just advertised right away as is, right? And we found a qualified tenant buyer who saw the vision of the property that we saw, because it was in a great neighborhood with some fixing up. Is going to be worth a lot more. And so they put down $10,000. They paid rent every month. So I believe that they were paying $1,500 a month, and we were paying the owner $1,100 a month. So there's a $400 a month spread there. And actually, on this property, the tenant buyers looked after any and every repair that needed to happen. That's just the arrangement that we had. That's an error on the slide there. It says 500. 500 is kind of the average that I do with people, but sometimes it'll be 1,000, and then the odd time, depending on what it is. If I do a tenant first where we buy them the property, we'll often do it where they're responsible for any and every repair. If it's these houses that we have picked up or it's in our inventory, and then we find it's a house first strategy, and we put a tenant buyer in it, we'll typically make it between 500 and 1,000 that they're responsible. So if there's a leaky faucet, they're responsible for it. If the hot water tank goes, they pay for the first amount and we'll pay for the remainder, that sort of stuff. So yeah, so that was a pretty cool deal because the owner was super happy, the tenant buyers were super happy because they're getting into a home with their kids. They put up a fence and they added value to the property, which is another great side benefit of doing these deals. When a tenant buyer's got money into it and they're invested in owning it, uh, they're going to make improvements to the property, which increases the value of the property for you and for the owner. So now whether you're doing it like that, where it's like when I talk about me and then the owner, that's what's called a sandwich lease. Okay. So I'm in the middle. I got the owner on one side, the tenant buyer on the other. That's a sandwich lease. Now, many of you who are watching this have a property or two. You can do this as well. It's not a sandwich lease. It's just called a straight lease option. And you put a tenant buyer into the property and it's a great exit strategy. So I did have a property at one point that I was not, well, close to underwater, but I was struggling because early on in my career, I over leveraged it. I had a first and second mortgage, and I I think it was my third tenant caused a fair bit of damage. So now it was vacant for a couple months, and I had to put a bunch of money into it. So I started to get behind on paying my taxes, which is not fun. But then I applied this strategy to it. The tenant buyer put down a bunch of money up front. They're responsible for repairs, and then I lined up their purchase date with me to align with my mortgage date, expiry date. And so it went from an underperforming, kept me up a couple nights sort of deal to a very good positive cash flow deal that I was very secure in it and made more money than if I had kept it in the same position because of my dumb mistakes. Don't make those mistakes. Learn from me, learn from others who've got lots of experience. And it helped me make more money than if I had just sold it on the open market with a realtor, right? And that's one of the side benefits here is that there's multiple places to make money. I won't dive into it right now, but there's about 5 profit centers when you put these deals together, and that's why these deals generate more capital, more monthly capital, more return on investment in a shorter period of time than a buy, rent, and hold in the same period of time. Now, every investor who's in it for the long haul needs buy, rent, and holds in their portfolio. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying don't do buy, rent, and holds, but these deals are fantastic if you want increased cash flow, if you want to structure no money down deals, if you want to help people get into home ownership, or just be creative about structuring deals that a lot of other people can't do, and they go, I can't help you, can't do anything with the property. You structure one of these deals together, and there you go, bada bing. You're making money for the owner, you're making money for yourself, et cetera, et cetera. And so with that guy in that house, they were so happy. They actually gave me several balls of keys, kind of like this. It was a bunch of keys, right? Oops. This sound. We were at a Starbucks and he literally had this ball of keys and he pushed it across the table. It says, Cam, I don't know what all these keys are for, but I know you'll figure out. Thanks for doing these deals with me. So I took a total of 4 properties off of this one gentleman who jumped into real estate investing, but just realized it wasn't for him. And that happens a lot. So yeah. All right. So, and you can save your questions till the end. You can just put them in the comment field. You can start putting them in the comment field now. Just refer specifically to what we were talking about and then ask the question. That will be very helpful for me. So, all right. So no money down flip. Many of you are going, what? A no money down flip? How do you do that? Yeah. So this is a no money down flip, right? Because you've, heard about flips. Lots of you have done flips. You've watched the shows where they flip a house in 22 minutes and make profit every time. And those are they call them reality shows. Those are not reality shows. They don't show you all the really messy stuff. And anyways, no money down flip. So this is a property that came to me through a referral, friend of a friend. Literally, it was, hey Cam, I've got this guy. Actually, you might know him. You may have met him. His name is Bob, whatever. I can't remember his name. And he's got a property that he doesn't know what to do with, and it doesn't show well. He's looking for someone to help him. Can you help him? Well, I can take a look. And so ended up going seeing this property and meeting. I'll just use Bob as his name. We met on the property, and actually we didn't. We just had a phone call. I didn't even meet him on the property because it was currently tenanted. So anyways, Bob had bought this house probably about, I don't know, 5-6 years prior, lived in it for about 3 years. And then he and his wife bought a new house, and they kept this one, but they moved out of it. So he did the absentee landlord approach to this property where he put tenants in it, but as long as the rent was coming in, he didn't really bother taking a look or whatever. So, almost 3 years later, he gets a phone call from a tenant saying, I'm going to move and just want to give you a heads up. Okay, thank you. Let me come by so I can have a look and assess what repairs need to be made, and maybe I might just sell it or whatever. So Bob went to see the house, and these pictures I'm about to show you were all a surprise to him. And this form of media doesn't give you the smell that was ever present in this house. Like, I don't often put masks on in-house, pre-COVID. This one I had to, and I also had to go outside with a mask on just to get some real breath of fresh air. So he told me about it. He didn't tell me the extent, and he said, here's a tenant's number. You can just arrange a time, to go in it. So that picture there with all the scratches, it's a dog at the back door. This is a basement bathroom. And the story here is that the tenant had a sewer backup in here, and she looked in the bathroom door and saw all the crap on the floor and turned off the light and shut the door, never to open it again. And that was at least 1 year prior. So yes. And apparently it was caused by a rat infestation somewhere along the pipeline. And anyways, it was gross. So yeah, there was that bathroom that was part of the issue, right, that Bob was dealing with. And you can see hardwood floors aren't great, and the door jambs are all marked up from the dog again. Lived in look here, lived in look there. The place just smelled awful. Like, mixed between the basement bathroom and the smell of the dogs in there, and probably never have vacuuming and all the dog saliva. Like, I love dogs, but this was awful. And it just was really bad. So can you imagine putting this on MLS? I mean, it doesn't show well at all. And Bob, the owner, knew that. He knew that it wouldn't show well. And he didn't want to be without rent because he had to still pay for the monthly mortgage, taxes, insurance, right? And so we talked about it. And, I asked questions, as I'm asking any investor. I'm trying to get as much detail, like, what do you want to sell it for? And it's like, well, I'm thinking, and I can't remember what he said. And, but at the time, knowing the market in that particular part of the city, put it on MLS, I knew that lowballers wouldn't offer more than 200. So as I kept asking him more questions, it's like, well, what do you owe on your mortgage? I owe about with penalties and yada, yada, 232. Okay. I mean, it's not worth that right now. in its current shape. So we structured a deal. So I had done a bunch of sandwich leases before. This wasn't my first flip. That was a no money down. But anyways, I said, okay, how about we do this? Because we ran our comps. We figured that the property, all done up, all pretty, would be in the mid to 330s. So we agreed on a purchase price of 235 in 7 months, and we'll pay you. What do you need each month for you covering insurance, taxes, and your mortgage? About $1,100 a month. Okay, so we'll pay you $1,100 a month, and we will buy it off of you for 235 in 7 months. So he was good with that. And so, again, I used very similar paperwork, secured our interest so that we were protected financially from this deal. And because we're going to be pouring more money into it, right? And then I found another investor just to lend us capital so we could do the renos. And I think it was about 50 grand that we borrowed. So this is the finished product. And this is the basement. And remember the back door with all the scraping and scratching? That's a back door. We did all new flooring wherever we could. We redid the hardwood floors, redid all the doors and the jambs and the bathrooms. Yep, even that other bathroom. We did the furnace, the roof, all that sort of stuff. I didn't do the work on this. Someone else did. But as you can see, it shows really, really nice now. So we put it on the market. And yeah, we sold it for, I can't remember the exact number, but about 340-ish. And we did have realtor's fees. We got a decent rate on that. And I think we walked away with about 30 grand of profit in the deal after we purchased the house and after we paid off our other investor and did all that stuff. So just so you know, kind of technically, because you're going, well, it was like, how did you sell it if it wasn't yours? So it's a function of the law. It's called a double close. And so what we did was we had the arrangement with the realtor that we sold it. And then on the day of possession, the new buyers, that we agreed at 335 or 340, whatever it was, the same day that they're buying it off of us for 340, we turned around and bought it off the investor Bob that we had agreed upon for the 235 amount, right? So it's a function of a lawyer, double close or simultaneous close. You got to get a lawyer who knows what they're doing, but it can be done. And once you do it, it's really not that difficult. And sure, you'll have people that have never done it before or who don't know much about real estate investing say, well, that sounds illegal or that can't be done. It's like, well, it is legal and it can be done. Just because not everybody's doing it doesn't mean it can't be done, right? It's like me saying, well, you can't walk on the moon. I mean, no one's done that. And those were green screens, right? And you're going, well, actually, I've walked on the moon and I know it can be done, or whatever the analogy you want to use. So that was that no money down flip. And it was secured by, $100 up front. Yes, we paid $1,100 a month rent on it. But if we had a mortgage or whatever, we would have had to come up with 20% down the purchase price and qualify for a mortgage, which would have taken, I don't know. I mean, how long does it take to get a mortgage these days? It's not quick for the most part because they're so busy. But we were able to structure this deal within a week and lined it up. The tenant was moving out 10 days later. And we had the keys, and the day the tenant moved out, we got in there with our bin, and we just started working right away. And so we just maximized our time and maximized our profit on that. So that is a no money down flip. All right, so I wanted to share a couple stories about a couple students that I've got. And so Kyle and Dave here are based out of Regina. So they came to me just under 2 years ago. They had done a flip where they purchased the property. They got, did they get financing for it? Anyways, I can't remember. They had a flip and the market shifted, which can often happen where you will, have a property and you think it's going to fly off the shelf. You're done renos and something happens. And all of a sudden it's like there's a whole bunch of houses on the market at the same time, just like yours. Right. So in their situation, they had people coming through going, wow, this looks really great. The price, 400,000. Okay, well, it's not bad. But I'm going to go look at the 7 other homes just like it. Some are a little bit more and a bunch are a little bit less priced, and we'll get back to you. That's a buyer's market, right? They got lots to choose from. And so now they're going, well, it's vacant. And even if we sell it now with kind of what's going on with the realtor fees, we probably won't even break even. We'll probably have lost some money. So Kyle reached out to me and said, hey, tell me a little bit about your lease options, your rent-owns. And so we talked about that. And so they ended up turning that flip that they did on their own. They owned the property. They turned it into a rent-own. So it went from a property that if they had sold it, they would have lost money on it, to a property where they got some money up front from the tenant buyer. Their positive cash flow each month. They were able to refi with the bank because they had a 3-year lease with the tenant buyer, pull out most of their capital. They had to leave some in, but they were still cash flow positive each month. Now they're in the process of selling it in 3 years. I guess that's a year now, at an increased purchase price. And so when they sell it, there's going to be no vacancy costs because the tenant buyers are in there. There's going to be no staging costs, no realtor fees because the tenant buyer is buying it directly off of them. And it's a win-win-win, right? So now they've gone on. I think they're up, 2 years later here. I think they're working on their 9th, 10th, or 11th deal. They've done a bunch of no money down deals with other investors. In fact, I just spoke with... they have reached out to a tired and frustrated landlord, and they're working with them right now to structure a deal. And I was called as a reference. And so, these guys are taking action, they're seeing results, and yeah, I'm super stoked for these guys. All right. So Myron, known this guy for many, many years, and he was following what I was doing. It's like, really like what you're doing. And so Myron ended up investing, and then he's like, okay, I want to learn how you're doing what you're doing. And so he wanted to take my education, like my coaching program, and but he didn't have any free capital. He didn't want to throw it in a card, and he just said, okay, so how much is it? And I told him, I could see his gears turning. A week later, he gives me a call and he says, hey, Cam, can I have another call with you, a Zoom call? I've got a friend who wants to invest with me. I've asked him if he would invest with me. And it's like, yes, totally. And so we had this call. And so long story short, his investor friend paid for his coaching, and he's going to get it back through the first deal. So they've already done their first deal. He bought a property. He put some sweat equity into himself, and now he's put a tenant buyer in there, and they're getting return on that. So I just love that story about, he wasn't sitting there going, I can't come up with the money, but he asked, how can I come up with the money? And he started brainstorming. He thought, well, what if I get someone who's interested in what I'm doing, and they be the money partner, or I be the active on the ground, boots on the ground partner. I'll run the deal. They put up some money up front, so I can learn how to do this stuff the right way. We'll get a deal. That same investor will qualify for the mortgage and come up with a down payment, and they'll get a return on that plus the initial investment back. I just absolutely love that story. All right. And so here, Adam from Alabama. So this is a very interesting story, and Adam has given me permission to tell it. So we met about a year and a half ago through some mutual Facebook groups, right? He's in Alabama. I'm here in Central Canada. And he's like, yeah, I've been real estate investing for a while. I don't really like my day job. Really want to do a rent-own. So we talked about it. We had a strategy session. and he decided that he was going to do it on his own. Cool, go for it. And so about 6 weeks later, again, we've been chatting, not about real estate investing, about other stuff, and then he posts in the group that he just did his first rento, and I congratulate him and said, "That's awesome. What sort of numbers do you think you're going to get?" He goes, "Well, yeah, let's have a conversation." So we had a call, and he told me about it, and within the first 2 minutes, I knew that there was something wrong with the deal that caused me some concern for him, and it was what tipped it off for me was he said, "Yeah, I got my lawyer to write up a contract, for the rent-own deal." I was like, "A contract? Don't you mean like contracts?" He goes, "No, everything's just all in one contract." And right there, I just knew that the deal was destined to fail. So we ended up talking about that. And then he's like, "Oh man, I didn't even think about that. I see your point." And then I started asking him some numbers, and I said, "Well, do you mind just send me your spreadsheet?" So I had a look at it. And the way the lawyer set it up was that when the deal was done, not only was Adam going to lose money on the deal, he'd have to write a check for $17,000 at the end of the deal. And that's not good. And so, the thing is, lawyers are lawyers, and it's like mechanics, right? Mechanics are mechanics, and there's good mechanics, there's bad mechanics, there's good lawyers, there's bad lawyers. I don't take my Volvo to get serviced by a two-stroke engine specialist mechanic, right? It's just, you don't do that because they don't know this car. So you want to take I want to take my Volvo to a specialist who knows how to work on Volvos. And the same with real estate lawyers. I mean, because you can get a lawyer who's not even a real estate lawyer, but they'll still do a deal for you because any number of reasons. But you want to make sure that you get a real estate lawyer that knows what they're doing, has had experience in this. So yeah, just be cautious about the professionals around you that, and be bold, ask some questions. Well, how many of these deals have you done? And if they get their back up, that's okay. That's probably a good sign that they're not someone that you want to work with. But if they're like, well, yeah, I've done a couple rent-owns, or I've done 20 of them, or 100, or whatever, or you know what, I haven't done any, but I really want to learn how to do them. Okay, well, that's different than someone who has never done them. And, so anyways, belabor that point enough. All right, so let's see here if there's any questions from you guys. I'm on a Zoom window. Hang on. Okay. All right. So I'm live. I'm going to zip over to the Facebook portal and just see what sort of questions are. Okay. So there's a couple. Awesome. Thanks. So let me just kind of go through them. All right. Thank you, Gotham. Good to see you. Amin asks, was this an agreement for sale with the owner? Yes. So that's something I don't, I go into depth in my coaching program, but yes. So you can set up rent-owns lease options with a lease and an option. That's really all you need. I do most of mine also with an agreement for sale. Basically, it's an offer to purchase dated into the future, right? So that's an agreement for sale. And so that's how I structure them. So yeah, great question. See here, Trevor asked, what percentage does the tenant buyer put down? So it depends on the purchase price of the house, but usually I like to see them put down about 2.5% of the future purchase price of the house, right? The purchase price that they're going to buy it for in 3 years. I want to see them come up with 2.5%. And then over the course of, if it's 24 or 36 or 48 months, they're going to pay the lease and then some more for the option. And that more for the option gets added onto the down payment. And I'm trying to get them north of 7% of the purchase price. So they've got 5% down for an insured mortgage and then 2% for closing costs. So I hope that answers your questions. All right. Trevor again asks, would love to know about the three contracts you use, purpose for each. Yeah. So really briefly, I mean, really good question. I mean, I go into a lot of detail about this because there isn't just one reason. There's a ton of different reasons. So first of all, a lease is a lease, and you want to keep the purpose of a contract. You don't want to commingle with other purposes. Does that make sense? So a lease is a lease. So keep the lease agreement separate. An option is an option. Keep it separate. The offer to purchase is an offer to purchase. Keep it separate. And I've got a couple other contracts that I use with my tenant buyers that I won't go into here, but they keep the deal very safe and secure for me and my investor. But so a real practical example is if there's ever a tenancy issue, you don't want to have the lease and the option tied together because now the tenancy board is involved in the option, right? So if a tenant puts down $10,000 and they've been saving up each month with you, that gets intermingled with the lease. It's just a hairy mess. You don't want that. So you keep the lease a lease, and the lease doesn't talk about anything else. Okay. And then the option is an option. So that's about all I'll go into today, but that's how I structure the contracts. So interested to know why someone with $22,000 to put down would choose a rent-to-own method, not just buying on their own. Great question. Because they couldn't get a mortgage, right? If I can remember back, their debt servicing was too high and their credit score wasn't great. So they couldn't get a mortgage. A bank would not lend to them. That's a very common one. Oftentimes people will think that rent-to-own and lease options are for low income. Now they can be, but on average, here in Winnipeg, my tenant buyers are averaging between $80,000 and $100,000 of income a year. And 3 years ago, I had a tenant buyer. They made $150,000. They couldn't get a mortgage. So that can also include having a consumer proposal on their bureau, a bankruptcy, a bunch of delinquent payments that shows up on their credit bureau, debt servicing over 45%, right, of their total gross. These are all things that the bank will just say, no, we won't lend to you. You got to get down this. And so when a tenant buyer comes into my rent-to-own program, we turn away tons of people, even people who've got good income and they've got a down payment, but their credit score is so bad that we just can't help them. So we'll give them tips on, what they can do to get to this threshold. And when you do, call us back. And lots have. But that's a very common thing, especially people who are newer to credit and they abuse it. They don't really realize it. And they buy new vehicles and, those payments are $600 a month. It just shoots their debt servicing way off because you can get a loan for a car with really bad credit. And the problem with that is that it just makes your credit worse because now your debt servicing goes way higher and it just pushes you further away. Sure, you got a nice ride for a couple of years, but you're shelling out money left, right, and center for that thing, and it's depreciating, right? So if you pay 50 grand for this vehicle, in 3 years it's worth like 15 grand. So yeah, I could keep going there, but so yeah, there's lots of people, Nate, who've got good money to put down, but they just can't qualify. Another example is someone who might have really great credit and they've got a good down payment, but they started their new business, 6 months ago or even 2 years ago, and their banks are going, we need more history of your business before we're going to lend to you. So yeah. How do you figure out how much capital you need in the rentals and the flip? How do you figure out how much capital you need? Well, I mean, that's two different spreadsheets that I use. So I can't really answer that in one kind of time, but it's, you got to know what that same house goes for in that area all fixed up. So that's what's called, comparables. So you get a great realtor who understands real estate investing to pull comps of homes in the same area of the house you're looking at, same style of house, right? If you're looking at a bungalow, don't pull comparables of a two-story. It's not apples to apples. You got to pull comps of other bungalows in your neighborhood, not on the complete opposite side of town or in a different city or town. It's got to be that. And so sometimes when you're in a smaller town, this can be troublesome because there's not a lot of comps. But you do that and you figure, well, what this house could sell for, because there's others that have sold, not other listings that are currently listed for sale, but other like homes that have sold within the last 6 to 12 months. And then you start working your numbers backwards and you go, okay, it needs all these things, and my numbers add up to, $40,000 that it's going to cost me either to hire somebody or for me to do a lot of the work, but I believe I can get it done with that amount. And then you just work the numbers backwards. And then you go, okay, well, how much do you want to make? Do you want to make 30 grand? Do you want to make more? And then that is where your purchase price number is set. And so what happens here is lots of people will run their numbers on deals. And, let's just say that someone's asking $300,000 for their house, and that this house could be worth $400,000, but you need to get it at like 350 or 250. And you go, man, that's a $50,000 spread from what they're asking. I can't ask that, or I'm too nervous to ask, or whatever. Don't be. You gotta make offers, because this is business. You got to make offers on properties. You got to make proposals. You got to talk to tired and frustrated landlords. You got to get out there, beat the path, talk with people, and make presentations and offers. I can't tell you. I can tell you. I can count about 5 different times that I've had for sale by owners thank me for my offer. It's too low, but thank you for making an offer, because I've had 10 other people come through this house asking me all the same questions you've asked, but they never made an offer. But there's the other group of people that say yes to your offer, and your jaw drops going, I can't believe they just said. The only way you're going to find out the answer to that question is by making the ask for that purchase price. All right, so let's see here. Let's go back. I just got a few more minutes, and I've got a giveaway here for you guys. So I'm going to give away a hat, one of these nice hats here. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen again. All right, I talked about three things that you can do today, just, based on what we've talked about. And the first one is to take action. And like I just said before, make offers. Run the numbers and make offers. You can always put in 1 or 2 clauses that you can back out of the deal, right? So whether that's subject to solicitor's approval or subject to, good inspection, give yourself a way to back out of the deal so that you can lock down the deal and do your due diligence and go, yeah, this is a really good deal, or no, I want to back out because I'm scared. And that's the biggest thing, right? If you learned one thing here today, right after this, take action, make a phone call, look up a house. You're probably thinking, there's that house that I looked at, a week ago. It was a for sale by owner. And I need to go knock on the door. I need to talk to that guy. So take action. That's the first thing. The second thing is, if you haven't already, please jump over to this Facebook group. It's free and it's called Rent Own Real Estate Investing. Just go into Facebook, type in that word, and it'll come up, and just hit join. I think there's 3 questions that you get asked to do that. And yeah, so that's the second thing, because what happens in there's people from across the country who are just like you. There's people who are brand new, never done a deal. There's people who have done hundreds of deals but want to learn this strategy. We're in there together. We're learning stuff together. So head on over to that and hit join. All right. The third thing is actually, I guess I got 4, but third thing is a free download for you. And when I talk about tired and frustrated landlords, I've got an ebook for you. It's about a 13-page ebook, and basically the title is A Guide to Tired and Frustrated Landlords. So this is a great book. It's stuff that I am still doing today in terms of how to find off-market deals and how to work with the investors who own properties that maybe don't want them anymore or are looking for someone to help them, and you can create a win-win with them. So just go to creativeinvestor.ca/TFL-ebook, and you can download that for free. You just got to enter your email address. All right. And so, yeah, we've had, Brenda, I'm not sure if you're on. I mean, a couple hundred people download this book already. I'm not sure, but had really good feedback on it. People are taking stuff from this, taking action, and they're seeing results. Now, if anything on here that we've talked about that you like and you want to discuss further with me, you want to unpack, if this is a strategy for you, or if you want to potentially get coached by me, head on over to creativeinvestor.ca/case study. And so what I've got there is a 19-minute video. It talks about some of the same stuff that we talked about today, but it goes a little different direction than what I did here. And then at the end, you can book a strategy session with me. And I think there is a place on my website where you can just book directly with me, books right into my calendar, if you want to talk about, figuring out how to do these no money down deals to generate cash flow. So I'd love to chat with you. I love helping people process, their goals, and I'm here and I'm stuck and I want to get to here. What's the best way to do that? What are your goals? Love to help you process that. So jump on over there, get the case study. When the case study's over, hit the book now and book a session directly with me. All right. So the question here, to win this ball cap that says Creative Investor. Hang on a sec. You're going to enter the answer into the chat. So the question is, earlier on in this broadcast, I mentioned the name distressed sellers. What is my acronym for a distressed seller? Okay, I mentioned it several times. And so enter the answer into the chat. So I will leave this open until, let's see here. I will leave this open until Saturday noon. No, I'm not going to do that because this is for the people who are on here live. I will leave this open until 6 o'clock today. And so the person who gives me the acronym of what I call a distressed seller will win this hat. Now, if there's multiple people that get the answer right, then I'll just do a draw. And we'll reach out to you and we'll get one of these hats to you. So, all right. Thanks so much. Just enter the answer into the live chat there. And I hope you learned something of value. Most importantly, from here, take action and start seeing results that you want to see. Have a great day.